Bonsoir à tout le monde. Good evening for everyone. We are so happy to also welcome J Tenzin Palmo in this our last lesson of this year. We close this year, in fact, and in celebrating these holidays in the presence of J Tenzin Palmo and her blessings, of course, and hope this coming new year will bring peace with it. First question, Jetsumna, we are in the period of Christmas. Sometimes people see similarities between the birth of Lord Jesus and the birth of Lord Buddha. Is it true there is really some similarities, or it's just an imagination?
Where did he go? He's gone off to a completely different place. Well, of course, I mean, you know, all genuine spiritual paths are pointing to the same direction. I mean, for a start, on the very base, all genuine spiritual paths are teaching us that we should be ethical people, that we should be honest and kind, help each other, have compassion, and so forth. You know, be truthful. And I mean, you know, everybody tells us this. And of course, so we should. And then from another point of view, from the highest point of view, everyone is also teaching us that our true nature is beyond the ego, is beyond the small self, and that we are something so much greater, and that the divine dwells within us, right? And that we are not who we think we are. And so that's where we're all agreed on. It's the bit in the middle, the dogma, which is the problem.
Yeah.
But the actual essence of of Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, really, they're all trying to get us to be nicer people and to recognize our true nature, which is beyond what our conceptual thinking mind tells us we are. We are so much more than we think we are. But, you know, in between, there's the path getting from here to here, and that path might be going in you know, up a different side of the mountain. So if you're going up the north side or the south side, you will have a very different view, and you will have different track to go up. So you don't realize you're actually going up to the same point at the top of the mountain because it looks different, right? So you think it can't be leading to the same place. Only those who have actually reached that place can recognize it is the same place. But most people never get to the top of the mountain. They get stuck halfway up. And so they think their mountain is different to other people's mountain. They don't recognize it's the same mountain, approach from a different side.
But Jatsumna, even in the story of the birth of Jesus and the story of the birth of Buddha, we can see many similarities. Is it true that there is similarities, and realize that people they have births similar, or it's just our imagination to look?
Well, both of them have certain miracles associated with their births, that they were very special. For example, Jesus, you know, with the three wise men following the star and then making him these offerings, even though he was just born in a stable. And of course, in religious art, there are the angels hanging out behind, so, you know, protecting him. The Buddha, on the other hand, was a prince, but he also was not born in the palace. His mother, Mahamaya, was on her way to her ancestral home, and she actually gave birth to the Buddha out in, I don't know, in a field under a tree. So, you know, both of them were not born in traditional houses. One was in a stable, one was in a field. but they both were in not in their home, right? And not attended by, lots of doctors and nurses and things like this. They were completely exposed, so to say. So in that way, yes, there are similarities.
Jetsumna, just remark, in fact, in the Quran, when the story of the birth of Jesus, it's so similar to the birth of Buddha. It is under a tree, and even same story. His mom was walking, and she felt that she should have done the birth. So we feel that really sometimes even in the stories, the realized man had so many similar things.
Why not? Why not?
And just you are talking about that dogma is different. We can go and how to go beyond dogma.
Because dogma is part made up by the brain, right? It's not based really on our genuine inner experience. It's mostly thought up by scholars who are intellectualizing their understanding and putting it in an order that they think will be the most agreeable. But that's where all these different religions, differ sometimes because they have to standardize the path. But, the actual walking the path and the actual goal of the path is surprisingly similar. If you read the great mystics of the Sufis, the Christian mystics, the Jewish mystics, the Hindu mystics, and the Buddhist mystics, what they're trying to express in the language of their own culture is very, very similar. You can't think that they're all experiencing something different. But they just have to express it. What they are realizing is something beyond words. But then they have to put it into words. And so naturally, they will use the words which they're familiar with, which is part of their own religious upbringing and culture. So then it sounds different. But if you look at the experience behind the words, you see how similar actually the mystical experience really is.
Okay. We'll start our regular questions, and also Genevieve Mahajoti has a copy of this question in case there is some problem in my Wi-Fi. She will take in the place. Jetsumna, my first question, you often repeat, it is always from this third book of you, Commentary on Meditation. And you say in page 83, and you often repeat a Tibetan aphorism which says, whatever you encounter on your way, immediately resort to meditation. And my question, in what can meditation help to overcome the obstacles of daily life, and how?
Okay, so there are many answers to that one, but to keep it simple, basically, meditation helps our mind to become calm and clear. If our mind is calm and clear, then we are much more able to deal with whatever happens during our daily life, right? It's mostly because our minds are so chaotic that we get into so much trouble when difficulties or pressures come in our daily life. So here, by meditation, we mean to become more aware and more mindfully attentive, more present, right? More centered. When the mind's scattered and distracted, which is usual, then we're swept along by any negative emotions which may come up. Suddenly we see something we like and we want to get it, we're so greedy. or something annoys us and we get upset and angry. Something happens to somebody else that we would like to have happened to us and we feel all jealous and so forth. And because we are not in control of our mind, we're swept along by these negative emotions, which then end up as negative speech and sometimes negative actions, right? Mm. Why? Because we are not centered, right? We are not centered. We are just swept along by our thoughts and feelings. So we need to cultivate inner balance, equanimity, and clarity. This is what we need. It's like at the moment, our mind is all covered in little hooks, which reach out to grab things, right? Mm. And we can't just allow things to arise, see them with clarity, and then allow them to go, to let go. Mm. So as a result, we are endlessly in turmoil, right? Mm. Why? Because we're not in balance. We're out of balance. Mm. So meditation, therefore, even in a moment of for example, if something happens which upsets us, then simply at that moment, to bring the attention back to breathing in, breathing out, that will allow the mind to settle and become centered again. And then we can look at the whole scenario and work out how to respond skillfully instead of unskillfully. So meditation isn't just sitting on your cushion. Meditation, sitting on your cushion, is to prepare us for bringing that mindfulness and awareness, that sense of presence into our daily life.
Sometimes people, they think about and they understand from this aphorism that to think about their problems in meditation, problems of daily life. Is it good?
No, not during the actual time of meditation, because that's just thinking again, right? We're just, whether you're thinking about your problems or whatever you're thinking about, you're still caught up in the thoughts. Meditation is to allow the thoughts to quieten down, to calm down, and to cultivate that consciousness, that awareness, which is behind the thoughts. Not to get immersed in thoughts again. I mean, at other times when the mind is quiet, then we can say, okay, put the problem to a deeper level of our being than our ordinary, conceptual thinking mind, which is just the surface of the brain. It's not a deeper level of our consciousness which knows what should be done. So just sitting there thinking, is not going to get us anywhere. It's just back into the whirlpool again.
But I listened many times to many people, even my students, they said that they can find in their meditation solutions for their problem of daily life.
But if you use your meditation for solutions for daily life, you're stuck with just ordinary surface daily life. You're not going deeper into the real quality of our awareness, of our consciousness. You're just staying on the surface still. I mean, very nice that they find some solutions, but that is not what meditation is for. Meditation is for recognizing the true nature of the mind. So why use a very, a certain scalpel just to cut carrots?
Jetsumna, my question number 2. You propose an infallible criterion for checking whether one is on the right path of practice by saying in page 100, you say, the fundamental point remains the same, namely to reduce the ego and open the heart to universal compassion. That's it, everything. So if we find that our practice tends to inflate our ego, it is clear that we are on the wrong path. If the sense of I tends to fade away, then everything is fine. So my question, yet we very often meet sadhaks, spiritual seekers, who are very serious and assiduous in their practices, but who always have a big enough ego. What is it due to?
It's a good question, Lwiis. I mean, it's very easy to fall into what has been called spiritual materialism, right? And unwittingly use the path to polish our ego or our sense of self rather than diminish it, right? I mean, many people, that's what happens. They think that they're on the spiritual path, but just actually they're just inflating and making a very nice, bright, shiny sense of me, you know, instead of diminishing their sense of me. So genuine humility is the absence of anyone, any sense of I, to be proud, right? So if we feel superior because of our pure lives or devotion or learning or all our practice and so on, then that becomes just another ego trip, isn't it? You know, and not spiritual at all. This easily happens, right? I mean, it's something which can easily happen. So we have to be careful. And I think one of the ways is by not taking oneself too seriously, that we should lighten up and have a good sense of humor about ourselves as well. I mean, a kind sense of humor, but be able to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously. Because as soon as we start trying to be ever so holy, then we're in trouble.
Yeah, but sometimes we found so many people who said, I am meditating to be more evoluted. I am more evoluted because I am regular in meditation. So
who is this I? Who is the evolution? That's the point. You know, I mean, there shouldn't even be the thought of being more evolved than someone else. So as soon as you start thinking, I am more involved than you, then that's the ego shining bright, you know, right? You know, I mean, any genuine spiritual master doesn't even have a moment's thought like that. They just simply don't, that's not where they're at all. You know, they're so simply not thinking they're superior to anyone else because they recognize our interconnection with all beings and that we all have genuine, what we call Buddha nature. I mean, that everybody has that and they respect that in everyone they meet rather than thinking I'm so special. I mean, as soon as you start thinking you're special, then how ordinary can you be?
Jetsumna, not a regular question, but people, even when they saw you with this today, they was always asking me how she can live 12 years in the snow, and even with this weather and temperature so low, how it means a woman like Jetsumna can live 12 years regularly in this bad and difficult weather.
Well, you know, when you're cold, you're cold. And when you're hot, you're hot. So what? Basically. Oh, yeah, thank you. You know, honestly and truthfully, I mean, apart from the fact that, you know, my cave dwelling days were a different lifetime, I never thought that it was difficult because it was so much what I wanted to do. And the opportunity to practice there, to be in that environment, to me was such a blessing that it never even occurred to me that it was, you know, it wasn't difficult because I didn't think it was difficult. I mean, so it got cold, so it snowed, so this, so that, so what? Who cares? I didn't care. It's not because I'm brave, courageous, or anything special. It's because I practice to do. And in that environment was the perfect conditions for carrying out my practices. So I was just so grateful. That's all. And very happy there. I mean, people all think I was suffering like anything. It was the happiest time in my life. Mm-hmm. I mean, external situations do not create happiness. It's the internal situation that determines whether we're happy or miserable. We can be in the most comfortable circumstances, in the most ideal, luxurious external environment, and be totally, totally depressed and miserable. Mm-hmm. Or we can be living in what looks outwardly as deprivation and poverty and be totally happy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have much to do with our external situation. Mm-hmm. Isn't it? Come on, you must remember yourself. You've been sometimes in difficult situations where inwardly you felt joy, and other times in very pleasant, luxurious situations in which you felt bored or depressed or, you know, distracted. Doesn't really have much to do with our external situation. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important to cultivate the mind, because our happiness and our sadness depends on the mind. It doesn't depend on external situation.
Okay. But always people are looking to external situation to make them happy and to make a change.
That's their mistake. And that's why people are feeling lost and miserable. And many people come from the West who have themselves achieved, you know, high positions in their profession. They have a big house, they have 3 cars, even maybe they had a very happy sort of family. But at a certain point, they said, inside they felt just empty, that it was all meaningless. And is this all there is to life? Just sensory pleasure, is that it? And having had all that, they can see, no, there must be something more. And so, of course, they tend to think, okay, I'll go to India. But often they come to India and then they get stuck here, you know, because they are finding there is something more, and it's not out there, it's in here.
Okay. Jitsumna, my question number 3. You give a great importance on our attitudes towards life's problems by saying, in everyday life, it is not the number of mantras we have recited, nor the number of lamas we have met. The real criterion is our spontaneous behavior in the face of the difficulties that arise. And my question, it is rather the negative emotions that take over in a problems situation, anger, fear, resentment, etc. So how do we adjust our spontaneous behavior?
Well, we create our spontaneous behavior by practicing over and over again with intentional, skillful responses, right? Until they become habitual and our negative responses decline. I mean, it's like the neural pathways in the mind. They are very plastic, and we can change those neural pathways. If that pathway leads to a dead end, or it's not the path we want to go on, we have to make the determination to go on a different path and keep going on that path until eventually it becomes automatic, right? It's like a musician, right? Practicing the same piece, the same scales over and over and over and over, you know, until the music comes out spontaneously. They can just play it, right? So this is the point. I mean, they have worked out that taking just ordinary people from the street, basically, and showing them video clips of very things which would normally arouse a lot of anger or resentment, and testing them, right? And they found that, you know, that the parts to dealing with anger and resentment lit up like anything. And then they started teaching these very ordinary people, right? Not particularly religious or anything, just ordinary people, started teaching them the meditations on loving kindness and compassion. And they did that just for a few weeks, not every, you know, for a long time, but just every day, a certain period, teaching them how to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. Then they again tested them with, again, video clips of very disturbing images. And really, to their surprise, they found that those parts of the brain which had previously lit up with anger and resentment now lit up with love and compassion. And so in a very short time, they had reworked their neural pathways. They had learned new habits of response. But it's because they did it again and again and again, very with intention, right? Thinking up some kind of, I mean, one can think of something in one's life which created a lot of anger and resentment and all sorts of negative emotions, playing that over in one's mind and imagining a more positive response, right? Again and again, until that becomes the spontaneous response instead of the negativities which we are habituated to. It's a matter of practice.
So you mean we have to train ourselves to get new good habits in?
Of course, of course. I mean, isn't that common sense?
These new habits will be in the place of the old bad habits?
We rework the brain. I mean, as I say, even scientifically, it's proved we can do that. And in relatively short time, it doesn't take years and years and years. It just takes determination.
But sometimes people, they thought that by praying, by prayers, maybe they can get a new good habits. It is true.
Well, prayer is always good. I mean, anything which is bringing up the positive in our mind is a good thing, you know. So provided we are praying for something good and for the happiness of others, and not just praying, may I have everything good for me, but really thinking of all the other suffering in the world and praying that should, you know, there should be a peaceful resolution. And also praying that our own heart should change and become a kinder heart. I mean, if we are genuinely thinking that we're on the spiritual path, at least we should become kinder people, nicer people. If we are nicer than ordinary people, then what's the point?
Okay. Jetsumna, my question number 4. You repeat a Tibetan saying that says, page 106, change your attitudes, but stay as you are. And my question, isn't that a paradox? How can we change our attitudes without changing ourselves?
Well, basically, I think it means that we shouldn't pretend to be someone we're not, you know, ever so spiritual or whatever, right? You know, we should remain natural, right, as we are. But the change will slowly come from within. It won't be that we're determining that from now on, I'm going to be a goody-goody and everyone's going to admire me. It doesn't mean that. It's not that we're playing a part, right? We stay how we are, but inwardly, as we are working on our mind, then the change will naturally come without us having to fabricate it, you know, and pretend, right? So then it will be a genuine change, and it will reflect our true nature, right? It's not a pretend nature that we're putting on in order to impress people. Because sometimes if people get on in, you know, they convert to some spiritual path, then they try to act out that how they think they should be acting, right? And it's not true. It doesn't reflect their true nature. So this is the point. The change should come from within and not merely playing a role which we think is going to impress people.
Okay, sometimes I read in Buddhist books, answer to things and do not react. What is the difference between answering and reacting? Do not have a reaction, it means.
Well, I think it just means that we shouldn't just immediately, especially with a negative reaction, we should just, you know, if there is inner awareness and our heart is genuinely centered, then we don't just spontaneously react expectantly in a negative way, but we see things as they arise, and then spontaneously we will respond, but in a skillful manner, not in you know, like pushing a button and you get coffee or tea. It's not like that.
Okay. My question number 5, Jetsumna, you have a positive approach to sexual desire and the possibility of transforming it. You say in page 108, sensual desire can be transformed into benevolent affection. Thus, those among you who manifest these strong emotions must not despair, because they may go very fast and very far, because it is a Ferrari they have, not a bicycle. Only they must know how to drive well. And my question, is this desire, sexual desire, harmful in itself, and how to practically transform it into benevolent affection?
Well, of course, obviously, first of all, sexual desire is nature's plan, you know, to keep the species going. So all animals have sexual desire, otherwise they wouldn't bother, right? So being part of our animal nature, it's neither good nor bad, it just is, right? So everything depends on how it's used. But because it is a very powerful impulse, right, with a lot of energy, in the Tibetan system particularly, there are practices which make use of this energy for opening up the psychic channels, right, and for activating the chakras. In Hinduism, likewise, in the tantric schools, there is a lot of making use of this sexual energy rather than just dissipating it, right? So, but this is a powerful practice, and it easily can go wrong if we don't have skillful guidance, right? So therefore, I'm comparing it to driving a very powerful car, like a Ferrari. I mean, you can, if you're a good driver and you're skillful, then it's a very exciting car to drive and will get you there quickly. But if you're not a good driver, then you're going to end up crashing. And it would be better to go slowly with a less powerful engine, right? So in the meanwhile, we can all meditate on loving kindness and compassion, which also makes use of this energy to convert any selfish sexual exploitation into benevolence and respect for others. I mean, that's the point. It's not against sexuality per se, but it's using it in a responsible manner, not to cause harm to others and not to exploit others, but to be respectful of others that we are in relationship with. But sex itself is neither good nor bad. It depends what we do with it. And as I say, it can be used on the spiritual path if one is in control of the situation and not controlled by it.
you are just repeating that it is not good or bad. It just is. But there is no bad action in sexual relation, especially if it's not a sexual relation between husband and wife. If it is outside of marriage, it is not a bad action in itself.
In itself, I mean, again, it depends, you know, on the mutual consent of both, whether you're using the relationship to exploit the other, whether there is really mutual respect and kindness towards the other. I mean, that's the point. Marriage itself was just, but, you know, in itself, it's just a ceremony. It doesn't, you know, it's in itself, it's neither here nor there. The point is, I mean, like you could be in a marital situation and a very abusive situation, right? I mean, just because you're married doesn't mean you're going to be nice to each other. So marriage in itself is neither here nor there. The important thing is the sense of respect, responsibility, and especially if there are children, that there should be mutual responsibility towards bringing them into the world and bringing them up. That is one of the problems now. Or not married, their relationship anymore. So there's so many divorces and so many couples splitting up, and then sometimes it's very difficult, especially for the children.
Okay. Jetsumna, my question number 6. You criticize any expectation of profit in spiritual practice by saying in page 109, you say, it is important not to remain in the expectation of profit. Just practice. Practice is impure when it tends to obtaining a personal reward. And my question, in fact, the majority of people practice with a view to some positive result. Does this intention block the process of the evolution of the practice?
Well, you know, one of the problems is that nowadays people are very goal orientated, right? The ego wants to accomplish and see the results of its efforts in our worldly achievements, in education. And then we bring that kind of attitude into our spiritual practice too. The ego wants to see that we're getting better and that we're getting, you know, wonderful experiences and everybody's terribly impressed with us. So this grasping attitude can easily be carried on into our spiritual activities. And that's the problem. It makes just another form of ego enhancement, which is the opposite of what we're doing in our spiritual quest, which is to reduce the ego, right? This is the problem. So therefore, the result of that is that we should practice right, without any thought especially happen. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So what? I mean, it's a way to practice because it does not polish the ego. I mean, all spiritual practice must be in order to help us to dissolve this small self, which is blocking our vision of our true nature. And so if we're just solidifying the ego, even if it's a nice, you know, bright, shiny little ego, it's still ego. And that ego in itself is the basis of delusion. The ego is ignorance. So in the end, we're just enhancing our ignorance, which is the opposite of our spiritual aim, which is to develop wisdom.
But sometimes people, they practice for a long time, they don't see any changement, so they stop to practice.
Yeah, well, that's also because sometimes maybe their way of practicing is not right, and it's still caught up in, in the intellect, in the head, and it hasn't really descended down into the heart where there is transformation. This is the thing. I mean, I think that they need guidance.
Okay. So there is something wrong in their practice?
No, Atisha, who was a great Bengali scholar yogi in the 11th century, who went to Tibet from India, he said that the way to know whether our practice has succeeded or not is whether or not our negative emotions have declined, increased, or stayed the same. And our anger, our greed, our jealousy, and so forth. So if they have stayed basically the same, or have even gotten more because we become more sensitive and angry, or we become more jealous of others who seem to be getting more ahead than we are, getting more teachings than we're getting, and so forth, or more greedy, then all that practice was a waste of time, basically. The real criteria is, have we begun to overcome our greed, attachment, anger, jealousy, pride? In other words, have we begun to dissolve the ego or not? That's the only test of whether we've actually made any advance. So, but you can't ask for that. You have to see whether it naturally is happening, not just by suppressing those emotions, but why those emotions no longer arise.
So the criteria is from outside the meditation, from the daily life, not from the inside meditation. What is coming in the meditation?
Essentially, yes. Yeah. I mean, if we are meditating, then we go out and the whole thing falls apart, then clearly there was not any very deep insight. It was very superficial. And so this is the problem. It has to really go down into the center of our being and really transform from within. And the only way you can test that really is by going out and seeing how that has changed one's whole attitude towards daily life and others, in a positive way. We've lost interest in a lot of the things which previously we were, like people go into retreats and they come out and they discover that they're no longer interested in all the things which previously had held them so fascinated. And at the same time, irritating things no longer seem to irritate them so much anymore. I mean, often they're quite surprised themselves at how actually it did affect a change within. And that's the only criteria by which to really know, is anything really working or not.
Okay. My question number 7. You speak of a certain center beyond the ego by saying in page 113, you say, the relationship between Christian and Buddhists is relatively easy because we have a lot in common. The fact that Buddhism is not theistic is not a problem in itself, since we all believe that there is something beyond the ego. My question, what is this something beyond the ego actually? Is it God? And what do Buddhism and Christianity have in common?
Well, we partly dealt with that at the very beginning when we were dealing with saying that all spiritual paths share much in common, right? So, I mean, as I said then, we all, we try to be more kind, we try to be more ethical, we think of others beyond ourselves, but especially we recognize that our true nature is not this small self, which we normally identify with, but is this very pure consciousness, which is non-dual, not making a separation separation between self and others, but which integrates clarity and ultimate intelligence and tremendous love and compassion. And so you can call it God, you can call it Buddha nature, you can call it Atman, you can call it Anatman. Any name we give it, it's just a label on space, because the actual experience is beyond our conceptual mind. It can be realized. Of course, it can be recognized and realized. And that realization, usually expecting it, because they recognize that they are not this little ego that seems so real, that ego is just a fabrication of the brain, and that we are something so much greater than that, by whatever name we want to call it, right? So that is not usually dependent on any outer or inner circumstances, right? All genuine mystics of whatever religion has spoken of this state, although by its nature, it is beyond words, it's beyond thought, literally. You know, one time I saw this documentary in which they were interviewing this Russian Orthodox priest. And he said that the first thing that they are taught when they enter the novitiate as beginning monks is that anything they say or think about God, it's not that. And that's it. The idea of God, the idea of Buddha nature, the idea of any of these qualities of our true nature, which is also ultimate reality, one with ultimate reality, is literally beyond thought. But it can be known.
It can be known.
Of course. And all the great mystics of whatever religion or non-religion have known it, but then they don't know how to speak about it because it goes beyond our, dualistic conceptual thinking mind. The experience is there, and we know this is true. This is truth. And no religion has a copyright on truth. That's absurd, right? Yeah. They're all just fingers pointing at the moon. But we shouldn't get too absorbed with the finger. It's the moon you got to look at.
Okay. Jitsumna, my question number 8. You warn practitioners against the very frequent confusion they make between pleasure and happiness by saying in page 128, you say the problem is that the ego takes pleasure for happiness. It does not know what true happiness is. It does not know that it is when the ego precisely decreases that happiness increases. My question, what is the essential difference between pleasure and happiness? And no happiness with ego?
Well, pleasure really depends on sense gratification, and therefore it's impermanent, right? It can never be satisfied. It's like a monkey. You have a monkey in a fruit tree. It grasps that one piece of fruit, takes a bite, throws it down, grasps at another tree. It's endlessly taking a bite and immediately reaching for something else. So we run after sense pleasure, and we call that happiness. But genuine happiness is an inner joy that just arises, and it's not connected with the senses, and it suffuses us from within. It's on a completely different, it's not usually dependent even on outer circumstances, although sometimes people who are in nature, right, or in the presence of a great being, a great master, that can activate that inner sense of joy, right? But sometimes in the most unlikely circumstances, suddenly people just feel it welling up inside. It's just pure happiness without any external trigger for it. And it brings a deep sense of inner contentment and satisfaction, right? There's no wish to grasp at anything. It's just this deep sense of inner well-being, which is very, very different from sensory gratification.
Okay. Jitsumna, question number 10. You criticize utilitarianism in the spiritual life by saying, page 131, if I believe that my spiritual life is made to turn to my sole advantage, I am wrong. Or it means that the nectar has become poison. The question, can my spiritual life therefore turn against me? So what is the point of all these efforts?
So, I mean, the genuine aspiration on the spiritual path should be for the benefit of others, not only for ourselves, right? So when our practice becomes selfish and only concerned with my advancement, my advantage, then it's ego-based, right? And so it's full of self-cherishing. And in that way, the nectar of spiritual life has turned into poison. Right? I mean, our spiritual life should connect us with all beings. It shouldn't be totally introverted into me, me, me. If it's only that, then it's, as I say, you know, the benefit of a spiritual life has become corrupted. This is why it's very important to meditate not only on looking at the mind, but also on universal love and compassion and rejoicing and so forth, to open up the heart. I mean, our heart has to open towards others. Otherwise, what's the point? We're just enhancing our ego absorption, our self-cherishing mind.
Okay. My question number 11, Jetsumna. You warn against identification with disturbing emotions by saying in page 136, it is like a movie that we watch. If it is romantic, we shed hot tears, etc. Similarly, if we realize that this is all just a projection of our mind, so we will stop identifying with negative emotions. The question, how can we stop this illusion of identifying with our disturbing emotions, especially since we live these emotions, body and soul?
So again, it's by observing our thoughts and emotions, right? As they pass through the mind, instead of being swept away by them. I mean, the whole point is that normally we are so completely immersed in our thoughts and our emotions that it's like a torrent river rushing by and we're swept along with it, right? So therefore, because we are so involved and identified with our thoughts, we believe what we think, right? We think, I think this, therefore it must be true, right? This is the thing. And so we don't see that these are just mental impulses supplied by our brain. But once we learn to observe the mind, right? Sit back and observe, like sitting on the banks of the river instead of being swept away by the river, then we don't become so lost and distracted anymore, right? We become centered. We become more detached, more discerning. We can see the thoughts instead of being the thoughts. So, you know, really, it's just a matter of practice until we become more present, more conscious, more aware. And we witness the thoughts instead of being the thoughts. Then when we see negative thoughts coming up, we can say, oh, this is anger. And then we recognize it's anger. It's not that we push it down, but we can let it go without feeding it. Normally, by the time we recognize we're angry, we've already been swept along by it. And then it's very difficult. It's like being on a racing horse, right? It's very difficult to stop it. But if at the beginning, when it rises up, we recognize it, then we can also make the decision that we're not going to follow it.
But this attachment to our thoughts, it is a part of our illusion. Why we have this attachment?
Because of our ego. I mean, our ego is very useful because it helps us to deal with everyday life. But the problem is we believe in our ego and we think it's something solid and real and something which is enduring, and that is the essential me. And that is our delusion. That is our essential big, big mistake, which even nowadays, modern scientists are beginning to have. The ego is solidified, but in fact is made up just of mental impulses. There's nothing solid there at all. If we look and say, where is the ego? We look for the ego. Okay, who, and the more we look, it's like shedding like an onion, you know, take off layer after layer after layer, but there's no core. And that is what we have to recognize, that we can make use of our thoughts. We're not trying to blank out. Our thoughts are very useful, but we should be in control of the thoughts, not the thoughts in control. The ego is the servant. It can be a very useful servant, but if it's the boss, then we're in trouble, because the ego by its very nature equals ignorance. No, we don't see. This is our problem. We're completely deluded. This is our tragedy, you know? But we don't have to be. I mean, that's the point. I mean, there are ways out of that knot that we have caught ourselves up in.
So you think our ego is a part of this big illusion in which we are living?
Of course, it's like a spider in the web, you know, but that spider, if we really look into it, doesn't really exist. It's fabricated by our mental processes.
But you are just...
But we're trapped, and this is why we suffer and make others suffer and destroy our planet and all the living beings on the planet. I mean, we're pretty useless. You know, we have this incredible intelligence, and yet we make so little use of it. So all the great masters like Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha and Krishna and all these people were trying to help people to get back to the reality, which is our true nature. They were all trying to point out how to do that. But then people mess it up, you know, they don't understand the message, and then they corrupt it. It's corrupted by our conceptual, ignorant mind.
When you said ignorant mind, it is the ego itself?
It's a pure ignorance. We do not know things as they really are, and we fabricate and project constantly. I mean, the whole of our external reality is a projection. I mean, even neuroscience nowadays, that's why it's so fascinating, sees that it's telling us it is all a projection. And we don't know who we are, and we don't know what we are experiencing. And we're all trapped. And we have to find the key to get out. That's what all these spiritual paths are about. They're trying to help us to get free from the prison house of our own delusion.
You think all the realized masters, they have no ego at all?
Well, they might have some ego, and it comes, but at least recognize it. Mostly we don't recognize it, we just believe it. Because we've never seen the alternative. We've never seen our true nature. If we don't see our true nature, how can we know what it is?
Seeing me, Jetsumna?
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing me?
Yes, I'm seeing you.
My question number 13, talking about the relationship between the mind and the dharma, you say in page 145, we say, we must strive to change our mind in order to involve it in the practice of the dharma. The question is, so our normal mind is not consistent with dharma, and how to make it consistent with it?
Well, I mean, as the Buddha himself said, ordinary mind is like a mad monkey, right? So that doesn't sound very dharmic. Or it's like a wild horse, right? I mean, you know, you see a horse and it might have great potential, but it's wild, so it's not going to go where we want it to go. So our ignorant ego goes the way it wants. And this is often contrary to a genuine dharmic mind. The ego can, of course, pretend to be spiritual, but it's only a surface shine, right? Not genuine inner illumination. That's the difference. So that's why we have to observe the mind, right? And cultivate awareness, love, compassion, step by step, to tame, train, transform, and transcend our mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The mind is capable of anything. It just depends what we do with it.
Mm-hmm. So, sometimes you say that all the thoughts are like waves and we are like a fish who are between these waves, or
well, we're swimming in an ocean of thoughts and consciousness, but we never ask, like a fish, we don't ask what is water. So we don't ask what is a thought. We just think, and then we think, well, because I think this, then it must be true. We believe everything we think. We believe all our memories. We believe all our opinions and views. And yet it's actually just thoughts. What is a thought? Who is thinking?
Yeah, but Jetsumna, I have always this question: mind and ego, they are same, or there is difference between both? Between
I mean, even if the ego dissolves, we still have a mind. I mean, mind in the sense of consciousness. Consciousness goes beyond the ego. The ego makes use of the consciousness, but it is not the same as consciousness. I mean, the deeper levels of consciousness are way beyond the ego. I mean, the sense of me and mindness is just something which is fabricated by the brain in order to help us to survive, to live. But the point is not to think that in itself it's something solid, real, unchanging, the center of everything, which is me. And that is our big, big mistake, because it's not like that at all. And what we are is something so much beyond the ego. And the ego is blocking that. That's the problem. We believe that the ego is on our side, but it is not on our side. And it is blocking our true perception of our real nature.
But Jetsumna, consciousness itself, it's not a part of our mind?
Well, it depends what you mean by mind. I mean, on one hand, you might say consciousness is mind. Mind is consciousness. I mean, but the consciousness, where is the consciousness? It's not the brain. I mean, even, you know, neuroscientists now who are studying consciousness finally have agreed it's not the brain. It's something which is ineffable, which they don't know where it is. They don't know what it looks like. They can't catch it on their machines. But it is what is shared with all living beings on this planet. And that the level of consciousness of all the living beings is the same consciousness. This is very, very important. That at a fundamental level, we are all interconnected. It's only the ego that thinks we're something unique and separate. When we get back to the fundamental nature of our pure consciousness, then that is like space. You can't divide it. It's something which interconnects us very, very profound level with all living beings on this planet, not just human beings.
So it is the ego who creates this difference between me and the other, and this.
Yes. Yes. And that's why we suffer. Because we have attachment, we have hatred, we have jealousy, we have pride, we have anxiety, we have fear. All of this is based on the ego.
So all this play, it's creation of our ego, our mind?
Yep. Of that egoic mind, which is a conceptual dualistic mind, not the non-conceptual, non-dualistic, pure consciousness, which is our true nature. It's like the clouds, but we don't see the sky.
And it will create it to continue to be alive, no?
Well, I mean, even if the ego dissolves, we're still alive. In fact, it's considered to be awakening, right? The word Buddha is to be awake. And it's considered that while we are in ego consciousness, we're really still sleepwalking. We're living in our unreal projections. When we actually recognize and realize the nature of the true nature of the mind, our pure non-conceptual primordial consciousness, then it's like waking up. Suddenly we see that we are not something single and against the rest of the world, there's me, but that we're all part of the whole flow of the universe, not just the planet. And that we're all deeply interconnected at a very, very most fundamental level. And so there's this open, spacious clarity and tremendous love and compassion, totally spontaneous, because there's no barriers.
Okay. Jetsumna, question number 14. Speaking of the disadvantage of laziness, you say in page 149, more than our karma, it is our laziness and our stupidity that prevent us from obtaining more satisfactory answers. The question, does the notion of karma therefore become a mere pretext to justify our failures in spiritual practice?
Sometimes people blame their lack of progress on heavy past bad karma, right? So, and this may also be a contributing factor. I'm not saying it's not. However, the very fact that they are trying to practice shows that there is also very good karmic conditions, right? Also present. Otherwise, they wouldn't want to practice, right? Most people can't be bothered to practice. The very fact they have the aspiration to practice shows they have good karma. It's not just bad karma, right? So even obstacles can be turned into if we sincerely try. We can't say good, something very bad might happen to us, but if that creates our ability to have more compassion, more empathy with the suffering of others, then actually that was a good thing, right? So if we give up too soon, or if we act only half-heartedly, then we are progress. But that's not due to that karma, past karma. That's due to our laziness, our efforts. So, you know, really, why are we still in samsara, right? It's because we haven't really enough effort to get out of samsara. So here we are, stuck. And more habitual, you know, deepen lifetime after lifetime are habitual negative responses. So we have work to do. You know, you can't blame it all just on something in the past. What are we doing in the present?
So, Zetsumna, people mostly they escape from obstacles, and you are saying that obstacles is a part of a practice.
Very much, very much. I mean, if we only have very nice things happening, I mean, I feel it myself because mostly I have only nice things happening and I meet with really very nice people and it's very nice. And then I think, oh, I'm such a nice person maybe. But actually the strength of our practice comes when we meet with difficulties, with difficult people, with difficult circumstances. How are we responding? Yeah, do we respond negatively or do we take these difficulties onto the path? How can we cultivate patience if nobody ever annoys us, right? So instead of being angry with the person who is difficult, rude, or obstructive, we can recognize that they are actually on one level like our spiritual teacher because they are teaching us how to be more forbearing, how to be more tolerant, and so forth. And how can we have actual empathy for the suffering of others if we ourselves have never suffered? I mean, when suffering comes, either we can just spend our time feeling sorry for ourselves, or we can use it as a way to open up our heart to recognize the fact that so many people in this world are suffering likewise. Like if we're sick, we can feel sorry for ourselves and just lie there feeling, you know, poor me, poor me. Or we could practice taking in the suffering of all those others in the world who are suffering like I am suffering and imagining taking in their suffering ourselves and sending out light and good health to others. In other words, expanding our compassion and our empathy for others. It all depends on not the actual circumstances, how we respond to those circumstances.
But Jetsumna, still in this topic of practice and karma, with our regular practice, we can go beyond our karma?
Well, we can use, I mean, something happens which we might think is due to bad karma. How we respond to that will, I mean, moment to moment, we're eating up the past. And in the present, we're eating up the past and we're creating the future by how we respond to what happens to us. So if we are in a situation where, you know, whatever happens to us, we are taking it onto the path, then we have gone beyond the concept of good or bad karma, because whatever is happening, we will make use of it on the path. When good things happen, then that's very nice, and that, you know, helps us to, you know, have joy in our practice. But when difficult things happen, likewise, we use that as a way to cultivate forbearance, patience, compassion, and all these other qualities. And that is also taking these difficulties onto the path. So in that way, then whatever happens, we have no hope and fear. We don't have to hope that things are going to go the way I want them to go, and fear that they might not go the way I want them to go, because however they go, we will accept that and use it to enhance our practice. And so therefore, in that way, whatever comes, we are open. So in that way, you can't think good karma, bad karma. It's just whatever happens.
But in fact,
we are
the
using
concept
it for our, to bring it on the path.
But in fact, the concept of
and when there's no ego, then the only time we go beyond, it's the only time we go beyond karma is when there is no longer an actor. Right? As long as we think I made this karma, or I am, experiencing the results of past actions, as long as we have an actor there, we are connected with our actions and the results. When we recognize there is no actor, when we go beyond the ego, then karma no longer activates. That's why people can be liberated. But we're only liberated when there's no longer the idea of someone to be liberated.
So we can stop the effect of karma by our practice?
Of course, if you want to. I mean, if there's no ego, then there's no karma. But as long as we think there is a me who is experiencing this or doing this, then we are trapped.
Okay. My question number 15. Jetsumna. Question number 15. You often advise the practice of laughter in the spiritual way by saying in page 151, you say, we should learn to laugh at ourselves in a fun way without falling into triviality. And the question, to what extent does laughter play a positive role in the spiritual path? Some even talk about laughter yoga. What do you think about it?
I think that honestly, a good sense of humor is very important in this life, including in the spiritual life. We should not take ourselves too seriously and make the spiritual path into something heavy and somber. Laughter sends very positive messages to the whole body and mind. And of course, we mean here kind laughter. We don't mean derisive laughter, sneering laughter, but a genuine, joyous laughter, right? It lightens everything up. It lights us up, right? And it spreads good energy all around. So really, it's only the ego that takes itself so seriously. And so we can, laugh at even our egoity, but in a kind way, not in a nasty way. We're not putting ourselves down, but we're seeing the ridiculousness of our attachments and our aversions, and lighten up. Definitely. I mean, this laughter yoga is probably a very healthy thing. It sends very positive energy throughout the body and the mind.
Even when we force ourselves to laugh, it is good, you think?
Well, people say so. I mean, people who do this laughter yoga, they have to train how to laugh, but after a bit, it just takes them over. And then everything kind of, like big black, dark clouds gradually become puffy white clouds. That's good. I mean, nothing worse than being in a, very somber kind of ever so religious kind of atmosphere where everybody's afraid just to rejoice.
The great teachers like Dalai Lama and others, they like to laugh. They laugh, in fact.
They're laughing all the time. I mean, one of our favorite lamas who is in Tibet, I mean, the whole time, his eyes are dancing with laughter. And I mean, there he is, stuck in Tibet, running this big nunnery with so many problems and dealing with officials and dealing with all the problems that come. But there's so much joy. It's this inner joy that just bubbles up the whole time. And then this laughter, which comes from the stomach, from deep inside, and everybody laughs with him. you know, because you have to laugh when someone laughs like that. You know, it brings out the joy in us also. It's beautiful.
You laugh mostly, usually in your monastery, Jatsumna?
Well, people like the nuns very much because they're always smiling and laughing. And so everybody says how good it feels to be here because the nuns are so happy and they're always laughing and smiling, and there's a lightness which people find very helpful, especially when they came from the, you know, noisy, polluted cities and the heaviness of people and everybody's so serious. And then they come here where there is this joyousness in the air, and they really find that very healing.
Jatsumna, my question number 16. Speaking on the primordial importance of the relationship with our mind, you say in page 156, you say, the main thing is therefore to always be in peace with our mind, not even to decide to do this or to do that. It is our true nature which expresses itself. The question, who creates this continual conflict between us and our own mind? Us or him or the mind itself?
Well, because it's the conceptual ego mind, which is what we've been talking about, locked in duality, self and others, and therefore often in conflict, right? So really first we need to relax and stay as centered as we can, as conscious and aware as we can, allowing the thoughts and the feelings to arise and then just to go, not grasping at these, without grasping, without judging, just allowing the awareness to be very open and spacious. Thoughts come and go, but we don't chase after them, right? Recognizing that all our thoughts are just projections of the mind, but they're not me, they're not mine. So we don't need to fixate on them. We can allow them to come up, be conscious of them, and allow them, like clouds in the sky, they form and they just disperse. Our problem is that we fixate and then that creates a lot of inner conflict. So relax the mind, allow it to be open, spacious, present. We can do it. We can all do it, but we don't do it. That's the problem. You know, it's not that it's that difficult. What is difficult is to maintain that awareness.
But Jatsumna, talking about thoughts, sometimes we have good thoughts. Even the teaching of Buddha, it's a thought. It's a thought, no?
Yeah, and so I mean, we allow the thoughts to come up, but we see they are just thoughts. You know, so there are useful, skillful thoughts, and there are unskillful thoughts. And we can cultivate the skillful thoughts and recognize and drop the unskillful thoughts. But at the same time, we have to recognize they are still all just thoughts. They're all still part of the conceptual thinking mind. They are practice tools, but they are not ultimate reality. Even the Dharma itself, the Buddha said that the Dharma is like a raft to take you from one shore to the other shore. But when you get to the other shore, you would be very foolish to carry the raft on your back out of respect for the raft carrying you across. At that point, you can leave the Dharma. The Dharma is only an expedient means to get you to the other shore. On the other hand, you'd be very stupid midway through to drop the raft that you're on. You need the raft to take you to the other shore, but it is not the other shore. It's only a way to get you there. So even the Dharma itself is just still conceptual thinking. It's not ultimate reality, right? It's what we said before. It's the finger pointing to the moon, but it's not the moon. And the problem is we tend to glorify the finger. And we examine the finger, we get fascinated by the finger, and we forget to look at what the finger's pointing at. So then people have wars about fingers, right?
Okay, yeah. Sometimes what to do with stubborn thoughts, negative thoughts, when thoughts is coming back and back and back, and it is disturbing us, it is a negative thought and still coming back.
Well, what we have to do is relax the mind and then allow that thoughts to come up and really just give it, those thoughts, lots of loving kindness and compassion, and say to those thoughts, what's your problem? Tell me about it. And listen to where these thoughts are coming from, they're thinking what they're thinking, and give them lots of, like a child, embracing it, you know, rather than trying to hit them or suppress them or, you know, even change them. Just to acknowledge them and allow them to speak. But then, you know, if we give them kindness and love and attention, gradually of themselves they transform.
So we should not.
It doesn't always happen like that, you know, but gradually they will, you know, those negative thoughts, because their essence is empty. They're not real. They're not solid. They're just habits of mind.
So we should not reject thoughts.
No, we should look at them. I mean, especially if we have recurring negative thinking, then we should examine that, but with a compassionate mind, not with a judgmental mind.
Mm-hmm.
And try to understand, where do they come from? What is it you're trying to tell me? Why do you feel like this? And listen, let them talk to us without trying to, you know, reject them or judge them or anything. Like just hear what they want to tell us with compassion.
Even they are negative thoughts, we should listen to.
Yes, you will listen to them. It doesn't mean we act them out, but we want to hear what they're trying to tell us. And instead of rejecting them and judging them as bad, we should try to understand where they're coming from and give them this compassionate attention. And then slowly of themselves, they begin to transform.
My last question, Jitsumna, number 17. Speaking of the movement of the ego in meditation, you say in page 159, one detaches oneself from the feeling of the ego, which always wants to go somewhere or do something. Relaxation appears. Authentic experiences occur, and the realization manifests itself. The question, so is the relaxation the result of a diminishing of the ego?
Well, you know, of course, relaxing the mind with open awareness helps us to diminish the control of the ego fixated mind, right? We have to remember that ultimately the ego consciousness is a fixation. It's a fiction, you know, that we're fixated on. It's not true. It's not real. It's not something solid, real, and enduring the way it seems, right? It's a distortion put out by our brain. That's all. But it's not here, right? This is neuroscience. This is not Buddhist. Our perceptions of the world offer us not a literal transcription of reality, but rather a seamless illusion woven from both the data of our senses and the models in our memories. Normal waking consciousness feels perfectly transparent. And yet it is less unreal than a product of our imagination, a kind of controlled hallucination, right? So this is neuroscience saying exactly the same thing, that our projection from our egocentric conceptual thinking mind is just a controlled hallucination. It's not real.
Okay. J Tenzin, before leaving you, it is our last lesson in this year. What is the best manner, according to you, to celebrate holidays like Christmas and the Happy New Year? People, they like to dance, etc. But as a seekers, what is the best manner, according to you, to celebrate?
I mean, you know, these great beings such as Jesus Christ came in the world out of compassion for us and our ignorance. And so we should embody his spirit by sending out compassion, because the world is desperately in need of compassion at this time, and peace and light. It's a festival of light, as is Hanukkah. It's all about, in the darkness of the winter. I mean, I don't know here, this is the darkest time of the year, illuminating the darkness with our love and our compassion and our wish for amity between all beings, kindness and peacefulness. So that we should sit and just visualize it spreading from our heart and illuminating the whole world, the whole universe, lighting it up with the message of peace and love and compassion. That is what we should be doing, because this is the time to remember that this was born into the world, and this is what we should be trying to embody. It's the spirit of Christ.
Okay, okay. Big thanks. Dr. Jacqueline, are you there?
Yes.
So you have something to say?
So
he is also in India, so you are close to J Tenzin now.
Yeah, he's in Nasik.
I am in Nasik, yes. And so this idea of fixation, really, it's a fundamental thing, and it's easy to understand it, but because it comes from moment to moment, it's really a big work to defixate our mind. And, in Latin, mens is mind and manus is hand. So mens and manus are almost the same word. Means the mind is like a hand, basically it's grasping. Even in the word mind and manus, manual, one can understand the link.
J Tenzin.
Anyway, happy Christmas to everybody.
And okay, see you.
And a happy New Year.
Meet you in New Year. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Be well. Be happy.
Happy New Year to you also. Yes, man.
Happy New Year, so.
Voilà. Dr. Jacqueline,